to explore another angle on this idea of the fuller life or the abundant life. So I'm going to invite my new friend, Joel, to come on up here. Come on up, Joel. We're going to visit a little bit. This is Joel Ahlstrom. And I've known you all of, 2 weeks now, Joel? That's pretty good. Yeah. Come on up, have a seat. Let's pull this in a little bit. Now, this is one of the most interesting people you're ever going to meet. Why don't you test and see if that thing works? Say hello.
Hello.
This is Joel. Okay, so Joel lives down, about half of his time down in the cities, and about half your time, are you up on Deer Lake? Is that what you said? Okay. Well, Joel's even written a book about the story of his life. I powered through this last week and read this, and there's some fascinating stuff about your life. Okay, Joel, when he was very little in his whole life, struggled with dyslexia and autism. And in those days, we didn't really know what that was. So that gave him some challenges. But you, Joel, overcame that, and he had an awesome, successful career in the grocery business, started as a bagging boy, right? And worked your all the way up to owning how many stores?
No more than 2 at a time, 4 stores total.
No more than 2 at a time. That's still pretty good. And when he was a young man, he and his brother said, you know what? Let's just run across the country. So twice he and his brother, they discovered they had a gift for running, and they legitimately, one day after another, ran from coast to coast. How many miles a day would you guys average?
The first run, we ran from the Golden Gate Bridge to the White House, that was the second run. The first run was Long Beach, California to Long Beach, New York. We averaged 32 miles a day, running at 7.5-minute miles.
7.5-minute miles for 30 miles a day across the country. What about your second time?
Second time, we averaged 51 miles a day, again running at a 7.5-minute mile pace.
51 miles a day. Now, which trip did you meet the president and go to the White House?
That was the second. The second run was in conjunction with the bicentennial. We ran from the Golden Gate Bridge to the White House, and we met President Ford on July 2nd in our bicentennial year.
Awesome. So like I say, a lot of interesting stories that Joel has in his life, but we don't really want to talk about that today. We want to talk about something even more interesting. So Joel, I want you to tell us about what happened in the last few years, kind of in one of the darkest periods of your life. You told me you had a nervous breakdown. So tell us about this experience and tell us what God did for you during this time.
Well, I've gone to church all my life, and I've always wished, I always knew there was something missing in my Christian life. I was a Christian. I gave my heart to Christ when I was a kid. But I knew there had to be something more to Christianity. I look around and I see Christians come and go, and Christ doesn't seem to make that much difference in their lives. And I was the same till I was 70 years old. But I just had a lot of pressure and everything that led me to a nervous breakdown. And at that point in my life, I decided I wanted God more than anything. I wanted that something that I knew that I was missing. For 2 weeks, I was in the hospital. For another 3 months, I hardly got out of bed. That whole time, I did nothing but seek for God. I just wanted Christ in my life. I wanted to be like David. I wanted to have a heart of a man. David was described as a man after God's own heart. I wanted that for myself. I came to Christ with nothing to offer. What do you give to God? He's got everything. So I just wanted His presence in my life, nothing else. I wasn't asking God to do anything for me, to resolve my problems or issues. I just wanted Him. And as this experience grew and grew, I came to a point where every day, for the last 8 years now, I get up every morning and I literally worship God. I read Psalm every morning and I seek the presence of God. It's totally changed me. We can't change ourselves. We can't make ourselves be good. We always fail. The only way we can have victory over that is to have Christ living through us, God living in us. And it just totally changes a person. Over the years, I've met a few people. I can think of a couple. When you called me last week, I was down in the Twin Cities meeting with a 94-year-old guy who's one of those guys. He just radiates Christ in his life. It's just a very, very unusual thing. When I was younger, I experienced another such person. I always wanted that for myself, but I knew that I didn't have it in me to ever experience something like that. How do you make that happen? Well, I finally came to a point after a nervous breakdown, after 70 years of failing to be able to do that, that I discovered that from my own life. I was totally blown away by it. I'm just a totally different person. People that knew me before can't believe the change. I can't either. Every morning I get up and I think, why me? I can't believe this has happened to me. And I wish that I could convey and explain it in such a way that all Christians could understand it and receive it and actually do it. It's not that common a thing. Why doesn't it happen more often? Why don't we see more Christians that just are overflowing with God in their lives? It's just such a rare thing. But I'll tell you, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. I had lived no stellar life by any means, but God, even after my career was virtually over, God was able to grab me and bring me into His presence. That's what it is. It's communing with God every day so that God just flows through us because we're so connected to God.
Now, you said, Joel, you talked about how this started as a desire you had. As you were in that season of life, you desired God. Tell us about that desire and how long were you in that state of wanting this from the Lord before it kind of came through for you?
You know, as a younger person, I always wanted it. I knew that that's what was missing not only in my life, but most Christians' lives. We don't see that very often. But I knew that it existed, and I always wanted it. I never thought I was capable of ever achieving it for myself. I just didn't have it in me. But when I had a nervous breakdown, I'm on my bed, and I had finally given up on achieving anything in myself. I had just totally given up. And all I wanted was God in my life. And you know, I remember thinking at one point, after experiencing this, that I desired to give something back to God, but what can you give to God? He's got everything. And all we can do is enjoy His presence and what He does in our lives. All of a sudden, I realized that I had just given God everything He ever wanted from me. Everything God ever wants from you. He wants you completely, 100%. And when that happens, our lives are changed. I was reading this week. I didn't know we were going to call the questions were, but I was reading R.A. Torrey, who was a famous preacher in the early 20th century. How do you get God? How do you get God living through you? The quote is this: we can have all of Him if He can get all of us. When we give Him everything that we desire and hope for in our lives, He can take over our lives and do things for us and just totally remarkably live through us. I have close friends that have just marveled at the change. I have one guy I've known for 50 years. We've been close friends. We've gone to the same churches together, and we are a lot alike in many ways. When I experienced this, he says, Joel, how did you do that? How did it happen? Because he, like me, always knew that it existed, but didn't know how to ever make that happen for himself. He still hasn't got there, but he's getting closer. But it is just a matter of giving God everything. I think of the rich young ruler often. God, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus replied, Sell all thou hast, give to the poor, and come follow me. Well, that's a steep hill to climb for anybody. I always thought when I heard that I couldn't have done that if I had been in his position. Have you ever thought about that? What would you do? You're already a Christian, so you don't have your salvation at stake. But I looked at him and I see that he responded by walking away sorrowful. You know, every time I heard that story, I kind of left the story kind of sorrowful because I knew that I couldn't do that myself. I finally have come to a point where nothing of my own making means anything at all to me. All I desire is God in my life. I discard all of that other stuff that I worked for and sought for my whole life for the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. Like I say, I get up every morning. I spend time growing and learning and finding out who God is. And he has just changed me so completely because it isn't me. It's him living through me, literally. Christ in us, the hope of glory.
And Joel, you spoke of joy, your experience of joy. Tell us just a little bit about what does that word mean to you? How has this joy in the Lord marked you?
Well, when I was a kid, I could do nothing. I was dyslexic, autistic. I didn't talk to another fellow student or teacher till I was almost through grade school. And not only that, I was the dumbest kid in class. I couldn't do anything. I just thought I was a total failure. I never expected to amount to anything. I realized I just didn't have the abilities of a normal person to ever accomplish anything. And I had kind of written off the fact that that was going to be my life. Eventually, I came out of it. Actually, part of it was the realization that I have an energy level that far exceeded everyone else. When I went to work in a grocery store, it wasn't a matter of a couple weeks before I realized I was outperforming everybody around me. I just ran the aisles. I could get more done than anybody. I figured everybody else, I figured, first of all, that I just tried harder, which was true. But a big part of it is I just had an energy level that far exceeds a normal person. Thus, I was able to run across the country twice. But I extended that ability into the workplace. I might not be the smartest guy in the world, or I still didn't relate to people very well. But I could get a lot done. I could work hard, and I could accomplish a lot. And that was enough to propel me into being successful in the grocery business. But back to the question, joy. I never sought anything in my life other than to prove that I could do it. That's the name of the book.
I can do it.
I can do it. All I wanted to do was prove that I could do it. I didn't care about happiness. I knew I never took a vacation. I never did anything like that. All I cared about was proving that I could do it. So after I experienced this marvelous presence of God in my life, all of a sudden I was overwhelmed by joy. I would have never sought for joy in my life. I wasn't even looking to be happy. I just wanted to prove that I could do something. But I was overwhelmed with joy. And I realize now, looking back, the verse in Psalm 16 that says, in the presence of God, there's fullness of joy. It's true. Every morning, I seek that presence, and I'm just filled with joy. I'm overflowing with it. It's hard for me to hold it in. It's just so amazing. I wish I could explain it in a way that would motivate other Christians to do the same. It's a tough thing to do. We're like the rich young ruler, most of us. We're like the rich young ruler. And I think that most Christians hear that story and they're not even sorrowful for it because they want to live their own lives. And for 70 years I lived that way. But now I just relish my time with God. I want Him. I want His presence in my life. But the joy was just kind of an added benefit. I never sought for that. I was just totally taken off guard by that happening.
So is he a good shepherd?
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is. Well, Joel, we thank you for sharing this part of your story with us. And Joel said this starts with desire. It starts with wanting God more than the other things that vie for our attention.